San Jose State continues to be the doorway to the heart of global innovation. What we learn together now will benefit our community when we welcome everyone back to campus. SJSU, Silicon Valley's public university.
Welcome, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending our town hall on San Jose State's Adapt plan and chance for us to answer questions that you may have about returning to campus and what some of those plans look like. I'd like to begin today as we do with the land acknowledgement, recognizing the traditional home of the Puishan Ohlone speaking people and the present day Muwekma Ohlone tribe. The Puishan Ohlone were missionized into both missions Dolores and Santa Clara, and the present-day Muwekma Ohlone tribe is comprised of all known surviving Native American lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region, who trace their ancestry through the missions San Jose, Santa Clara, and Dolores, and the historic federally recognized Verona Band of Alameda County. In Muwekma Ohlone language, Cochenyo, Muwekma means the people. And without them, we would not have access to this gathering. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. I'd like to start by acknowledging the incredible work over this past year from so many of our campus community, our faculty and our staff across all divisions, and the resiliency of our students. In the next hour, we'll highlight key aspects of our plans moving forward as we look at what we will be able to do in the fall semester. Now, we all know that there have been tremendous challenges we've faced with the global pandemic and shelter-in-place orders and issues around economic distress and disparities. And some of the news about reopening has been followed by closing up again, so it remains a very fluid environment. Against this fluid backdrop, but with some positive steps forward, we've developed and have been executing a 4-phase approach for the safe return to campus. And I'd like to offer my thanks and gratitude to those SJSU staff members who have worked so hard and relentlessly on this plan. I'd like to just recognize this incredible work because the complexity and challenges due to changing guidance from the state, from the county, from the CDC, you name it, and the unprecedented nature of the pandemic means that there are complexities that still remain. And indeed, our county's latest update from last Friday offers some new flexibility and opportunities for outdoor events. At the same time, new variants continue to rise up, and we don't know what that race will be between the vaccines and the new variants and how we can ensure that our campus community is safe. Now, today we'll highlight San Jose State's hybrid model for teaching and learning for the fall semester. It's really a transitional semester between the online that we have been doing to more in-person classes, and the process for safely returning our people and programs to campus. The majority of time today will be dedicated to answering your questions. But I want to thank those of you who submitted questions in advance, and we will do our best to answer those questions and prioritize those that affect most, if not all, of our campus community. The focus will be always safety and health of our students and the entire campus community, and that has driven our SJSU Adapt plan from the beginning and will continue to do so. And let me remind everyone as well that we are recording the town hall, and as we have done with past town halls, the recording will be posted and accessible on the SJSU Adapt website. Now, before I hand things over to Provost Vincent Del Casino to take the next part of the program, I'd just like to mention 2 brief housekeeping items. To submit a question for the Q&A session, please click on the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar. We'll be monitoring those and try to pick up as many of your questions as we can. And as I said just a moment ago, please note that we're recording today's session. And for those of you who have colleagues who aren't able to join us today, please remind them of that, and they can look at the Health Advisories page on the SJSU website and follow the town hall at a time that's convenient to them. And with that, let me turn this over to Vin, and he can kick things off to discuss our teaching and learning plan and what we anticipate for fall semester instruction. Vin, over to you.
Thank you so much, President Papazian. It's great to be here, and very important that we're having this conversation, being able to answer questions and so forth. So, it is today what we know and where we are and how we're planning. And we're doing our best to kind of project out into the start of the fall semester. But we entered this year almost a year ago when we started talking about moving to fully online classes. We're in a much more optimistic place in many regards than we were before, hoping that the vaccine will take effect, that more people have access to that sort of medical opportunity. And when we look at the fall schedule, we really hope to bring back a lot of face-to-face experiences. What is this going to look like for the fall for many, many of us? Well, it's going to be a mix of types of classes in different modalities. We're going to look for more face-to-face classes. Some of those will be hybrid, which means they'll meet sometimes in a face-to-face environment and sometimes in a virtual environment. And we will still have a catalog of online courses, more than we've had in the past, because we need to maintain flexibility for our students. We don't know yet where everyone's going to be vis-a-vis the vaccine, or how much social distancing we're going to need and so forth. And so we have to look at the entire campus and how many classes we can offer and how much of the density we can manage before we go ahead and offer as many things as possible. But our goal is to have the scheduled classes ready and up and running so that when students go to priority register for this fall in a little over a month or so, the schedule's there, and we hope it's the schedule that you will see. And I only say hope because there's potential for unforeseen things. If, for example, there's a new surge in the pandemic, we may have to change course. But our goal really is to strategically position as many classes as possible so students have flexibility in relation to their degrees. And so we're making those decisions right now about what's going to be hybridized and what's going to be virtual and what's going to be face-to-face. Again, like our lab science classes, a lot of our dance studios, our art courses, the things that we were already doing face-to-face this year will stay face-to-face, and we will add back courses, particularly critical ones, challenging ones that have been bottlenecks and so forth. And so we're really focusing on that. So students should be able to be prepared to come to campus at the same time that they did last year, with a lot more activity going on in the teaching environment. So we're really excited, and faculty will be involved in a whole series of conversations this summer on how to continue to evolve their teaching strategies to take advantage of this flexible, more diverse set of modalities that we're going to continue in for a while. I'm sure there'll be a lot more questions about this, which we're happy to answer, but I'm excited to think about the fall and the possibility that there's going to be a lot more interaction and connection on the campus itself. With that, then, let me introduce our next speaker, Dr. Barbara Foo, who is the medical director at our Student Wellness Center. And she's going to provide us some updates on COVID-19 and our campus response.
Thank you, Vin. Maybe we can go to my first slide. So testing, tracing, and encouraging vaccinations are all part of the university's response to COVID-19. With regard to vaccinations in our county, currently around 21% of residents 16 and older have received one dose of either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, and roughly 10% of residents 16 and older have gotten 2 doses of the vaccine. COVID-19 testing remains one way to continue to decrease the spread of the infection, and testing is available at all of our major local healthcare providers, at the free county testing sites, and these also can be found at the website sccfreetest.org. The Student Wellness Center also can facilitate testing for students who have symptoms or who have been a close contact. On-campus testing of student athletes is also going on in conjunction with conference guidelines. And all students living on campus have been participating in UHS testing events. These events occur when the students first arrive, and there are weekly follow-up sample tests done throughout the semester. Since December of last year, there have been 1,126 COVID-19 tests done at the UHS testing events. There have been 9 positives so far, and this comes out to a 0.8% testing rate. If anyone from the university tests positive, is a close contact, or is having symptoms, they should notify the university by reporting it at the university's health advisory's website, and a case manager will be able to provide them support, notify any university close contacts, and work with facilities to do any on-campus cleanings. Next slide. Since March 9th of 2021, the university has had 195 confirmed cases positive for COVID-19. Of these reports, 80% have come from students, 17% from staff, and 3% have been from faculty. Next slide. So data on COVID-19 cases from other universities is being tracked by the New York Times. They recently updated their numbers on March the 2nd. On this date, San Jose State was reported to have 185 cases. 2 universities within our same county, Santa Clara University and Stanford University, were reported to have 338 and 414 cases respectively. CSUs that are similar in size to San Jose State have had numbers reported between 20 cases to up to over 2,000 cases. Limits in comparing universities include the differences in size, different geographical locations, and differences in reopening models, with some universities being on distance learning, some in hybrid, and some in in-person learning. Next slide. So the next slide will show the monthly confirmed cases from San Jose State, which is on the left, and cases in our county by month on the right. So as you can see, the 2 graphs look very similar. At San Jose State, there have been 3 peaks in cases. The first peak occurring in April, the second in August, and the third that occurred this last January. But what you can also see is this pattern is really following on what's going on in our county. So overall, our university case counts look favorable, and this is a credit to our students and our employees who've been committed to these safety measures. It's still important to continue these practices of staying physically distanced, washing hands frequently, wearing a mask, and getting a vaccine when it's our turn. And all of these measures will help continue to keep our community safe. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Foo. The rest of this conversation will be dedicated to question and answer. I'm Lisa Malora. I'm the Vice President for Strategy and Chief of Staff, and I will be moderating the remainder of this town hall. As a reminder, you're welcome to ask questions through the Q&A button on your toolbar. We have received already a large number of questions through the registration process, and we will do our best to answer all questions during the session. Any questions that we cannot answer, we will try to post answers to on the Health Advisory's website. Health Advisories at sjsu.edu is the email where you can send additional questions. Before I get into questions for some of our other campus leaders, I'd just like to speak briefly to a set of questions that have come in concerning our return to campus. We've been asked, when will people be expected to come back to campus? When can people come back to campus? Will people have enough time to prepare to come back? What does the timeline look like? So we realize that there are a lot of questions, and at this moment in time, it feels like there is a lot of uncertainty. But I hope that we can assure you that campus leaders are working collaboratively to plan a return to campus that ensures the health and safety of our community. So we're going to plan deliberately and thoughtfully, taking into account our state and county guidelines. And over the next several months, as we plan, we will communicate frequently and share more details in summer town halls that will be scheduled for June or July. So with that, I will get into our first set of questions for Joanne Wright, who is our Senior Associate Vice President for University Personnel. Joanne, in her role, oversees what a lot of us think of as human resources, employee programs, and employee relations. So Joanne, let me ask you first, when the campus does reopen, or in other words, when people start returning to campus, what will staff schedules look like?
So remember that campus is open right now, and there are employees on campus as we speak. But what we are looking ahead to is a more comprehensive repopulation as more students in in-person classes return to campus. So our mission is to educate our students. And as we repopulate, that will be foremost in our minds. So for individual units, the question will be, how do we need to staff to best support this mission, given that we anticipate a larger campus population for fall semester? More students living on campus require certain support. More in-person classes requires support for students and the faculty who will be teaching those in-person classes. So we will be reviewing staffing plans with our managers and supervisors, assisting them in creating those plans to optimize support for SJSU's mission. Staffing plans may include in-person, hybrid, which is a blend of in-person and remote work, and remote work. We will be taking into account what in-person staffing is needed as we continue to adhere to current health and safety guidelines, such as social distancing protocols. And determinations on scheduling will be based on the job duties and on department and student needs, again, going back to our mission of educating and supporting our students.
So let me follow up on that part about flexible scheduling. A question that has come in that's representative of a number of questions on people's mind is, has there been progress in creating long-term flexible schedules or remote work policies?
Okay, so these options existed to some extent pre-COVID, but this past year, we certainly have experienced what we can do with remote work, and we do believe we'll be able to incorporate remote work and flexibility into scheduling as we move forward into our post-COVID world, and I said it, post-COVID. But of course, minimal population on campus creates different staffing needs than when there's increased population, such as what we anticipate we will see in the fall. So that being said, we will be looking at all scheduling options and modalities available to us and basing assessment for modalities of work, whether it's in-person, hybrid, or remote, on the job duties as it relates to supporting department and student needs.
So some members of our campus community are not comfortable returning to campus fully when that happens. What can you say about whether it will be mandatory to go back in person in fall?
So again, we will be working with managers and supervisors to assist them in creating staffing plans for gradual repopulation. For fall semester, we will be looking at expected population on campus, so the number of students in housing, the number of in-person classes, the tier level, and other factors to determine what staffing would best support SJSU's mission of educating and supporting our students. So some positions may remain remote, some a combination of remote and on campus, and some fully on campus, depending on what's needed. For certain positions, it may very well be required to return to campus. And as a reminder, again, there are employees on campus now supporting what we need at this time, which is for a limited campus population and extremely limited in-person classes. Now, with individuals who have concerns, such as concerns related to health conditions, they should consult with our leaves manager, Josh Etherington, who can discuss available leave or accommodations with them as needed. For other concerns, our employee relations team is available to discuss, and that would be Julie Passant, Stacy Elsabai, and we actually have a new person in our academic employee relations office, that's Rosie Coronado, who I hope many people get to meet soon.
Great. If I could you just elaborate, let's go back to that point about leaves. So we know members of our community have different medical underlying conditions, and some might feel that due to medical reasons, they shouldn't return to campus right away. So again, will those employees have an option to work remotely?
So again, that's goes back to discussing this with Josh Etherington. So any medical issue definitely should be discussed with Josh to assess leave options or accommodations that could be available for these individuals. And sometimes accommodations in their situations may be a remote schedule. It just depends on what the issue is.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
Similar questions about taking these, individual conditions into account. How will chairs be permitted to take into consideration faculty age or health issues in the assignment of online versus in-person work?
So scheduling for classes is based on department and student needs. I know I'm continuing to say that, but it's really important to remember that. And age should not be taken into consideration for course assignments, just as gender or other protected statuses would not be used as a consideration for particular assignments, right? Now this, I understand this may be a reference to an earlier mandate by the governor and which CSU responded with a leave program for those 65 or older. So I think that's might be where this is coming from, but that was only in place between, I believe, March and June. So that no longer applies. As for health issues, if a faculty member indicates there is a health concern, the faculty member should be directed to Josh Etherington to discuss available leaves or accommodations. And if a faculty member is approved for a leave or accommodation, the chair would be notified and can then modify the schedule accordingly.
Okay, thank you. We have some offices that have higher volumes of traffic with respect to students. So will those offices that have such high volume of traffic or students, will they be able to stay online for the fall semester?
So as mentioned earlier, we will be working with managers and supervisors to establish staffing plans. Now, looking at this question at face value, I don't have a lot of information here, but I'm going to say no, there should not be an expectation of remaining fully online for this area for fall semester. And I'm just saying, this is what I'm basing this on. So I'm making some assumptions that the reference to students is talking about in-person students. And I would take us back to our mission of educating and supporting students. And so the questions to pose here would include, how do we best support our students? What environment best supports them? Is it reasonable to expect that students will come by our offices in person? Is there paperwork that needs to be filled out, signed, or filed, or distributed? And these are all questions that need to be evaluated as staffing plans are created for fall semester.
Great, thank you. Very different question that came in. How will you work with faculty and staff who have moved out of the area?
That's an interesting question. Okay. So as with all of our positions, what will be of utmost importance is department student needs, our mission of educating our students, and what each of us needs to do in our respective positions to support our mission. So if the position is one where an on-campus presence is required to support that, whether it's a faculty or staff position, that is the expectation. Again, if there are health or caregiving concerns, because there may have been individuals who have some family, caregiving issues happening, that would be something to discuss with Josh Etherington on an individual basis.
Okay, thank you. I mentioned when I introduced you that you're responsible for a lot of different employee programs, and a lot of what you do is to make sure that our employees are supported well. So this question has to do with the high cost of living that our faculty and staff have to contend with. How will SJSU retain staff post-COVID? Many have left the Bay Area due to high cost of living and low salary with no plans to return.
Okay, so this is a great question. And I think many of us have been thinking about this a lot. We are all coming up to 1 year of our COVID work experience. For some, on-campus presence has remained as it was pre-COVID. As I mentioned earlier, there are employees on campus now as we speak, right? But for others, we have seen most or all of our year spent online. As we increase our student population activities on campus, there will be more employee presence on campus, both faculty and staff. That is a given as we move forward to serve SJSU students. And Ben mentioned there might be some going back and forth a little bit. We don't know what the future holds totally on that, but we are anticipating that we will be moving forward to having more students on campus. So different positions will have different requirements. Staffing assessment will look at how individual positions serve our mission. The assessment will look at modality and the reality of where we are as we move to that post-COVID world, right? So do we foresee continued social distancing? Yes, certainly in the near future. Do we thus foresee remote work in our future? Yes, but how much or how little has to tie into our mission? And I think it's safe to say that for positions that will need to report to campus, there can be room for flexibility, whether that is staggering schedules, flexing times or days, having some days remote and some days in person. There may even be determinations that a position could be fully or close to fully remote, perhaps not just for the immediate future or near future, but beyond. So the decisions about staffing do need to be made based on the position, the duties of the job, and how that position serves our mission. But I do see that as we move into our brave new post-COVID world, and I did say that, I think it's going to be a post-COVID world at some point, we will see a thoughtful process around flexible scheduling as we recognize how this can serve employee well-being.
Great, thanks. Joanne, I have a question that I want to bring in Patrick Day for, but I'll want to come back to you with a few others. Patrick, are you here with us?
Very much so.
Great, great. So Patrick Day is our Vice President for Student Affairs, and he oversees student involvement, campus life, health and wellness, and university housing, among other things, in his role as Vice President for Student Affairs. This is still a staffing question, Patrick. Will Student Success Centers be open at normal in-person capacity, or will some of the services remain available online?
Right. No, I appreciate the question. And I've been spending some time talking with some of the senior leadership within student affairs about this very issue, and really trying to think hard and think, considering that the winds are changing. The reality of student affairs is a high touch business. We've been successful at being high touch also in virtual spaces. But I do anticipate that as we go into the fall, we will have our cultural centers open and available, but we'll be talking with the staff around what makes sense. To Joanne's point, does it mean everybody's there at one time, or are we thinking about some flexibility in schedules? And we're going to spend some time really looking at that. And I do anticipate that we will likely have some of our services remain virtual, because for some students, that has actually worked really well and even better. From a scheduling perspective, for some students who don't have to travel and sort of negotiate those issues and still be able to participate in the programming that's coming out of centers.
Great, thanks so much, Patrick. Come back to you in a little bit with some questions. I'm going to transition to a set of questions that are about vaccines, and I'm actually going to start with Joanne because of the questions that you've been getting about faculty and staff expectations and return to work. So the question is, will staff and faculty be required to be vaccinated before returning to campus?
No, we will not be requiring employees to be vaccinated to return to campus, and no decisions will be or can be made based on vaccination status. So that being said, though, we do highly encourage our SJSU community members to get vaccinated to protect themselves and loved ones, and to protect the SJSU community and larger community as a whole.
Great, thank you. Barbara, can you answer that question for students? Will students be required to be vaccinated to return to campus?
Yeah, similar to what Joanne just mentioned, there are no federal, state, or county public health mandates to get the COVID-19 vaccine. So at this time, students are not required to be vaccinated, but they are, just like Joanne mentioned, like for employees, highly encouraged to get the COVID vaccine to protect themselves and also help protect others.
Great, thank you. So that's helpful to know what the expectations are, whether required or not. So 2 questions for Barbara. First, will vaccines be offered on campus, the vaccinations offered on campus, and how and when can I be vaccinated?
Okay, so as far as vaccines being offered on campus, the university had been exploring partnerships, but at this time, there are no on-campus vaccination sites. In our county, it's mostly been the larger healthcare providers that have been designated as vaccine providers. But as the vaccine provider eligibility expands, we will definitely keep the campus informed if there are new developments in this area. I think the second question was how and when can I be vaccinated? So the state of California is giving out vaccines in phases. And right now, persons that are in phase 1A and tier 1 of phase 1B are eligible. And amongst other categories, that does include healthcare providers, persons 65 years and older, and workers in the education sector. Now, the state has also said that beginning March 15th, they will include persons between the ages of 16 years old and 64 years old who are at highest risk to get sick from COVID to be included in eligibility. The state is also stating that in March, they are going to start implementing an equity framework in their vaccine allocations. So for more information about the state vaccination plans, you can go to covid19.ca.gov/vaccines. Currently, vaccination locations in Santa Clara County can be found at the website sccfreevax.org. And in California, statewide, vaccine eligibility and appointments can be made at the website myturn.ca.gov or by calling the phone number 1-833-422-4255.
Great, thank you. I know there's a lot of really good information out there on the different websites, including data. And I think data is a question on everybody's mind, which is what takes me to the next question that we've received. I'll start with Joanne. How will SJSU monitor the number of people being vaccinated on campus?
So we will not be monitoring who on campus has been, employee perspective, employee and faculty, we would not be monitoring who or who has not been vaccinated.
Barbara, do you have anything that you can offer with respect to students?
Yeah, same thing like Joanne mentioned. I mean, this time, since the vaccine is not being mandated, we're not formally monitoring. Of course, things may change with COVID, but at this time, no.
Great, thank you both. I appreciate your responses, and I know everybody who's with us today does as well. Let me now turn to a set of questions that are about academic planning. To answer them, we have our Provost, Vincent Del Casino, who oversees the colleges and the academic mission of the campus. And as the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Vin also provides leadership for undergraduate and graduate education. Then, first question, what is the plan for students who do not feel comfortable with in-person courses but have to take an in-person course?
Well, we're trying to do as much as possible to provide flexibility in the schedule that students can find their way to what makes the most sense for them. But in the context of where they may have an in-person class, we are doing everything within the state guidelines and more to ensure that our classes are safe. And I will say, from what we've experienced this year, when we offer face-to-face experiences, we really have not seen any spread within the classrooms or in the class environment. So we feel very confident that we're able to set up and establish protocols that are appropriate for each and every class. So in those cases where students may have a lab course or something else that demands in person, we believe we can provide that to them in the safest way possible.
Great, thank you. Different set of questions about logistics. Will there be space on campus for students who need to take a virtual course but are on campus because of another course that's in person?
Yes, this is a great question. And this is one that we have been discussing a lot. And we're going to have to activate the spaces of the library, the student union. Our outdoor spaces will be available as well so that students have places to land in between their classes. Fortunately, as we look at this, we'll start to examine those needs. We're not going to be at full capacity. We won't be as densely populated as we were, let's say, fall 2019. So we should have some flexibility in spaces where we can activate that for students. But it is top priority to make sure that the resources, the spatial resources of the campus are available to students.
So let me follow up on a point you just made, and it responds to a question that came in earlier. Why are classes currently being scheduled at full capacity for the fall semester when physical or social distancing will surely be necessary? So I know you'll need to speak to the premise of the question first.
Yes, the premise of the question is the assumption about what we know now versus what we know later. And right now, what we've done is we're not actually scheduling classrooms to full capacity. We're scheduling them about 75%, where we may need to bring them down to 50%. It just depends on how we're looking at this. We're also looking at opportunities to expand classes for social distancing over to the convention center, which might have room for us. So we may take classes that are scheduled for 30 right now in a room that only holds 40, and it may need a bigger room, and we're going to find those rooms for those classes. So we're looking at this, and so students will see a schedule that looks right about when their classes will meet, but we may be adjusting the rooms that people teach in throughout the summer as we start to see where things go. We also are not sure exactly how the guidelines will change for for higher education over the next few months and what the physical distancing requirements will be exactly. So we're trying to be flexible in addressing that question right now. But whatever is required will be what will be in place in the fall.
Great, thank you. Another logistics question. So for those in-person classes, it's entirely possible and likely that faculty will be using microphones while wearing masks. So will the university improve the sound systems in classrooms so that professors can use a microphone while wearing a mask?
We are looking at, Bob Lim, in fact, is looking at all the technology investments we need right now. Fortunately, with the most recent passage of federal legislation, there should be dollars on the campus to do such things. So we're absolutely looking at all the strategies we need in place to produce the best quality teaching and learning environment we can for the fall.
Great, thanks. I've asked Patrick to come back to speak to a part of this question that I think wasn't asked in this way, but it raised a new point. Some students may need accommodations in classrooms, and they may be relying on the ability to read lips and other things, or et cetera. So Patrick, can you say something about students who might need accommodations that in ways that differ during a pre-COVID academic life?
No, this is a wonderful question. I'm glad someone asked it. So one of the first thing I would say, because so many situations are very specific and specific to the student, is please contact our AEC office. Our Accessible Education Center is where we need you to be connected, because sometimes there's nuance in situations. And so what we will do is we will reach out directly to faculty members and talk to students, give them some, if it's some resources that they need to be able to better access some of the classroom content, if it's working with the faculty member to make an adjustment such that they can still teach, but that student can be able to access content in the classroom or virtually. These are the things that we need to know, but we need to know the specifics. And so I guess I'll ask if someone can drop the AEC information just right into the chat so that people can see that. We really want you to reach out. We have a wonderful team there that is working constantly to try and help individual students, because our faculty have absolutely been willing to work with us to really try and accommodate students. They want students to learn who are in their class, but we need to hear directly from students, and they can just do that outreach virtually, and they will get a response, and we can help them. And even if things change over the course of the semester, because sometimes it's different from one class to another, we can still respond and try and work with that student and with their faculty members so that they can be successful.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming back spontaneously. Then let me go back to other questions about academic planning. So I have two questions that dovetail. The first is, will faculty have the option to continue teaching online in the fall if they are more comfortable than with a hybrid model? And that relates to a different question about how decisions are made as to which courses remain in person, hybrid, or online.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it dovetails with a number of other things I've seen pop up in the question and answer about this. And it goes back to a couple of things. The first is we have to meet the students where they are within the context of the teaching and learning environment we're allowed to provide. So right now we might be scheduling a class in a room that looks like it's going to be full to capacity, but if we have requirements to have physical distancing, we're going to move that classroom at some point in the schedule this year. For faculty, they have to understand that the students are the ones that drive the demand for what types of classes there are. So modality is not necessarily an individual faculty choice. They don't go in and check a box and say, all right, I'd love to teach all online this fall. That may be offered to some faculty depending on what the schedule of classes demands and what students need. But that's got to be the top priority. So if faculty certainly feel more comfortable and feel more effective in one modality than another, that's a conversation to be had, but it's not the exclusive driver of the final decision of how the schedule of classes will be made.
Great, thank you. And Joanne, I know that you might have some input to offer with respect to the faculty contract. Is there anything you'd like to add here?
I think Ben covered it. I mean, it's always, as you said, meeting students where they are, and scheduling is based on department and student needs. So, if there's a determination that classes need to be in person, or hybrid, or online, that's how the scheduling will work, right? Scheduling faculty according to what is needed there.
Great, thanks so much. Vin, here's a broad question. What is the fall going to look like for international students this year?
This is a really important question for our international students. And right now, as far as we know, we go back to the environment that it looked like in fall 2019 with the regulations that students must take the majority of their classes in some type of face-to-face. That is not actually currently defined as either hybrid or totally in person. So you can imagine that our international students will be limited to one online course in the fall as they were in fall 2019. I hope, to be honest, that federal legislation will shift on this and we will see a change. And I hope actually the Cal State system sees this as a priority as the largest system in the country to talk about, because one, the rules were antiquated in the first place and now they're being reapplied on us. But the truth is we may be going back to exactly what it looks like in fall 2019, which again is going to demand that we have more face-to-face classes available for our international students to be able to come and graduate.
Great. Now I have a question, and if you're not prepared to answer, we can come back to it at one of the future town halls. Will the library be open for students?
Yes.
You can drop your mic now.
No, absolutely. We have to have the library open. As the campus becomes open, we have to have those spaces available for our students. This goes back to the question of students being able to drop in and find a place to work during the day while they may be in between face-to-face or in-person courses. So the library will absolutely be open. Exactly what services will be available and which spaces in the library, we're working through a plan, because again, safety and health have to be the top priorities as we think about that. And that's the safety and health of our students, as well as the safety and health of the faculty and staff that work in the library. You are on mute, but it's a really great question.
Thank you. It gives me a chance to ask it a little bit more eloquently. Thank you for answering all the questions about academic planning. To your point about safety and health, I'm going to turn now with my next set of questions to Tracy Fertilage, who is our Senior Associate Vice President for Facilities Development and Operations. Tracy has spearheaded many of the physical changes on campus to keep us safe during this time. So we're grateful for your work. Thank you. Question for you. Many people have not been on campus since the shelter-in-place orders took effect last year. Could you share what changes SJSU has made to the campus to ensure the safety of our community?
Sure, Lisa, thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be here. As we've seen throughout the pandemic, our safety has improved when we adhere to recommended personal hygiene and safety practices, and then also make good choices about the types of activities that we pursue. So addressing safety within a campus, though, requires a combination of a good operational safety plan, consistent adherence to good hygiene and safety practices by the campus community, and then also employing other strategies to slow the spread of COVID-19. And I think during this time that I get to spend with you, we'll talk a little bit more about those strategies. The SJSU Adapt plan is going to continue to guide activity taking place on campus and serves as a base guideline for safe operations, as well as outlines expectations for personal behavior and use of space by students, faculty, and staff. The Adapt plan will continue to evolve based on changing conditions and requirements, as well as our campus repopulation plan for fall of 2021. In addition, our environmental health and safety services team will also work closely with operating units to develop operational safety plans. And this is especially true for those programs which carry a higher degree of risk. And that's so we can ensure that we take a consistent approach toward compliance with CDC, state, county, CSU, and university COVID requirements. And many of you are probably wondering, well, which programs are those? We're currently evaluating that, but certainly it will apply to some of those programs that have things that operate under sector guidance in the California Blueprint for Safer Economy that is beyond that of just higher education.
Great, thank you so much. Let me pause here for a moment, Tracy, just to share with our participants today that we are monitoring the chat and the Q&A. We've received a high volume of questions, and so we will insert them into the groupings of questions that we received during the registration process. And as we mentioned earlier, we'll do our best to answer all of the questions that we receive, prioritizing those that we know to pertain to the larger groups of people who are here. And for those questions that we are unable to answer during this town hall, we will develop answers and post them on our Health Advisory's website. So let's go back to Tracy. As you mentioned, compliance with the different guidelines that are out there. Will we need to wear face coverings and maintain physical distancing in the fall?
I know we're all eager to let go of those things, but as of today, we definitely anticipate that face coverings and physical distancing will continue to be required. Although we also recognize there are going to be opportunities to reconsider what that means in terms of building and space capacity limitations. This will continue to evolve, and we see that currently in the guidelines. They continue to get updated and they evolve. And I also recognize that as more and more of our population gets fully vaccinated, we are creating a higher level of safety within our communities. So. But having said all that, we'll also have personal protective equipment stations. We have them around campus right now. As we populate in the fall with greater numbers, we'll have more of them. Those stations will contain face coverings, gloves, and hand sanitizer. We'll place them strategically throughout the campus, and we'll also make those personal PPE starter kits available to folks.
That's great, thank you. Tell us a little bit about the plans for cleaning of and disinfection of spaces. How will you address cleaning in spaces where a person who was determined to have COVID was working or learning or teaching, essentially where people who are positive have visited? How will you clean those spaces?
Sure, and let me give you a little background on the whole cleaning plan, because this has been a question that we've received a lot of inquiry about, and there also is a lot of science and facts that have emerged around the spread of COVID over time. Our team has also gotten much better at performing these additional duties. So we're going to continue to provide a clean and safe environment for all. This includes some high-touch cleaning and other practices that we have to disinfect locations. Our intent is that we will clean those frequently touched surfaces in common areas and have increased restroom service during the day. But generally, it's going to be challenging to provide cleaning between classes because of how course schedules are and the amount of time between them, as well as just some of the informal use that we anticipate is going to happen as students try to find a place to sit and to take another class. Having said that, we will have cleaning supplies available to departments upon request, so that individuals can clean their workstation, or students can also clean the spaces that they're in during the time that they're using it. Our overnight custodial team performs our regular custodial care program, but they also ensure that spaces that highly used in traffic spaces are disinfected. Now, when it comes to potentially contaminated spaces, we have a specially trained team, and we work very closely with our case management team, that's Barbara's group, to ensure that spaces where positive individuals are properly disinfected as quickly as possible. The strategy that we take is that upon learning, we immediately go out and disinfect that space, or we take steps to cordon off that space, preventing its use until the disinfection can be completed.
Great, thank you. Now, we've mentioned already, many people have not been to campus for almost a year, and it will still be a couple of months before we see larger waves back. What can we all expect to be in place with respect to signage when we come to campus or when we go inside buildings?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because some of us have been on campus and we have put up some signage, but we've also tried not to oversign the campus and just sign those areas that are being used. We're going to have to employ a more assertive strategy at getting signage out and around the campus. One of the first things you're going to find is that as you enter the campus, from one of the paseos and our main entries is that we have some signage up that talks about some of the basics around COVID safety that's expected of all of our campus community members, and also restricts visitors, people that are not here for the purpose and intent of the university program. So those signs I anticipate will continue to be up. In addition to that, when you enter into a building, we have signage in place that talks about the overall safety plan of the campus. And that's typically our county signage. You'll see a big check mark on the sign that says we've got a social, they call it a social distancing protocol in place. But in addition to that, you'll start to see as you walk through the building a variety of other signage designed to create a safe environment. That signage will communicate building and room capacities to you, use and hygiene guidelines around spaces, as well as help manage queuing in areas that might end up with a line or decrease unanticipated interaction due to circulation and wayfinding. So think about signage that will help you travel safely in an elevator, use hallways, stairs, entrances and exits and such.
Great, thank you. Now, with more people returning to campus over the coming months, I know a lot of people have asked questions about air circulation. So the question for you now that came in during the registration period was, what has SJSU done to increase the air circulation in indoor spaces, especially rooms with no windows?
There have been a lot of questions about building ventilation systems this year, and rightfully so. There's also been a tremendous amount of work done within the field of mechanical engineering to study COVID, how it spreads and what it means for our ventilation systems, as well as within the CSU itself. The CSU has a highly qualified group of deeply respected mechanical engineers who have a lot of industry experience, who advise folks like myself that are in charge of facilities around strategies that we can use for a variety of things. This year, their focus has certainly been on COVID and on the types of systems that our individual campuses have and providing recommendation. Our team has implemented the strategies that have been recommended to us and to the system. That includes maximizing the use of outside air and secondary filtration within our systems. And then you also asked a little bit about operable windows. What do we do? Well, we want to encourage you to use your operable window. If you're in a space with an operable window, open it if weather conditions allow. And as that we know that will further improve airflow. Now, when it comes to spaces that don't have windows, we're certainly continuing to assess strategies because the body of work continues to evolve as to how to best manage those spaces. However, we do believe our system level approach is sound and we have maximized airflow in those spaces. Some have asked whether or not we monitor airflow for classrooms and other spaces. And what I can tell you is that, well, some of our building systems are older and therefore a little more limited in terms of real-time monitoring capabilities. Our facilities team has gone out and worked through different individual spaces, checking on what the airflow is, what the air changes per hour are in a space, and then employing strategies to maximize that, and especially in spaces where we have a higher number of people that will be present.
Great, thank you. We have just over 15 minutes, so I think for you and then the panelists who come after you, will maybe try to go just a tiny little bit faster.
Okay.
So this question is about physical distancing and density. What is the plan for building and room density or capacity limitations, including classrooms, shared offices, and other spaces? And I think I saw in the chat a question even about labs. What other activities that we have been unable to do this year will be allowed next year?
Okay, it's a big question, but what I can tell you about space and density and capacity issues is that we see that the landscape is ever evolving. We've all seen the the blueprint for a safer economy and the different tiers and how that's connected to different percentages of occupancy or recommendations. We're going to continue to monitor those requirements and work to maximize the number of activities that we can accommodate on campus in a safe manner. But as of today, as of March 10th, we anticipate that, as I said, physical distancing is still going to be required. So there's going to be some capacity limitations for buildings and rooms, as well as restrictions on certain types of activity. We anticipate there will be some adjustments, as Vin spoke to in-person class and lab sizes and or the delivery method. We also recognize that remote work may still be used in some conditions where that supports our business plan and the activities we have on campus in order to de-densify certain spaces. Shared office environments may require some adjustments to ensure that we have appropriate physical distancing. So there may be staggered schedules for use. In-person meetings should still be discouraged, and use of break rooms will remain the way that we've planned it to date, which is food storage and food preparation activity only. We certainly anticipate that athletic and recreational activities will be allowed, but to varying degrees, and that's going to be based on the classified safety risk of the activity and whether it's held indoors or outdoors. So expect us to be able to do things, but with different rules for different types of things that we want to do. Housing will see a greater density than it's seen this year. Dining will open up more. We anticipate that, but outdoor dining is still going to be encouraged. We saw this week that the state, or in the last week, everything's melding together, that the state issued updated guidance around gathering and live performance events. So we know that we're on the road to doing more of those types of events, but we also recognize our ability to do them is based on the type of activity combined with whether or not we'll be able to meet the minimum requirements set in place for those activities to be conducted safely.
Great. Tracy, I have a bonus question for you. In 30 seconds or less, is access to buildings open, or will it now require use of tower ID cards? Paired with that is a question, will there be limits of building and room access using the tower ID card, and how is that determined? So that's really 2 questions, so 3 total.
So 30 seconds or less, yes, you will all need to use your tower ID card to get into buildings. The campus will remain a closed campus. This move, as we moved into doing that this year, certainly COVID created some of that, right? But we also recognize that campus security being in a downtown urban area is something that we always aspire to improve. And so buildings will remain closed, but your tower card will get you in. And we will have different hours and access for different groups. So there will be some limitations around around student general access, while faculty and staff will have much more robust access throughout the day.
Great. Thank you, Tracy, for answering all these questions, and thank you for all you're doing to keep our community safe. Let's go back to Patrick Day, our Vice President for Student Affairs. Welcome back, Patrick. The first question for you is about the experience for students outside the classroom. In-person instruction is as important as co-curricular activities. The question that came in is, what is the plan to ensure we have co-curricular activities for students?
Right, it's a great question, and I'll say it's an evolving one. And I just want to remind people that we have to be guided, and we as an institution have to be guided by the county, the state, as well as the California State University. And so that really impacts some of the things that we're going to do. Our plan is to be able to offer as much of the co-curricular experience that we have offered in the past. There is no one more than me and my team that would love to see, again, 10,000 people out on the Paseo at noon. We probably are not going to be there this fall, but we do plan on having more things open. The student union will be open, at least in part. That's what we're planning for. We will have potentially, a lessened density. We will continue to open some of the things that have remained. In fact, our Spartan food pantry inside of the student union has remained open throughout this past year. Our health center has remained open, though on a modified schedule. We anticipate that it will continue to be open. We anticipate expanding those hours. And let me just remind everybody, we have people who live on our campus, the folks who live in University who are part of University Housing Services. They very much have been real heroes in this process and making sure that our community, along with our students, have been safe. So we will continue to have that program. We anticipate that we will have, hopefully, we will create opportunities for our student organizations to be able to have what will likely be smaller events. We don't anticipate that we'll be able to have the large events that oftentimes we have, but we do anticipate that student organizations will be able to meet in socially distanced spaces. And we anticipate that we will continue to have some of the programming, and we will certainly have some programs, continue to have some programs virtually. So for instance, our Spartan Speaker Series, which might draw hundreds of students, we probably don't have a place to do that indoors, but we had huge success with that as a virtual experience. So I think it's for students, it's going to be a real balance. It's going to be really a hybrid experience, but we're going to really try and create an increased amount of community. We certainly know there will be more things face-to-face. We're certainly going to do our best, and I think Tracy alluded to it, to try and bring back our intramural experiences for students. We know how important that is. And certainly our SRAC will be open as much as we are able to open that relative to the county guidelines, whether that is swimming, which we have opened probably more than anything else, the ability to swim laps, but also physically distancing some of our workout experiences inside the building as well, and limiting the number of students who are able to access the space. We're going to continue to work with that and provide as much access and as much engagement face-to-face as we can, and by making sure at the same time that our students are safe.
Great. Another question, Patrick, is about being familiar with our spaces. So our current first year class has had a very different experience than all other incoming classes. We received the question, will current freshmen, the fall 2021 sophomores, receive orientations and campus tours like the incoming freshmen?
What an interesting question. I don't know that we have decided to do that specifically, but we would, is what I'd say. What we are talking about is not just, we have not forgotten that this year for this set of Frosh students was very different. And for many of them was not what they had anticipated. And we're thinking very deeply about not only how do we bring in a new set of Frosh students, but how do we really connect this group of students that will now be sophomores. They've been incredible and have moved through this experience with a lot of courage and commitment. And we want to make sure that they are having really the same experience to build community, to make friends, to create connections. And so we've got some ways that we're thinking about doing that combine both virtual engagement, but also in-person engagement. We're talking about some house structures, trying to really create smaller groups for students to really be able to connect in virtually, if not physically. And we certainly are going to create as many opportunities as we can for those students who choose to live on campus again. We really want those students to have that opportunity. And so we're going to make sure that we try as best we can to give them that opportunity, because they've been great.
Great, thank you. I have one last set of questions for you about housing.
Sure.
Students receive applications to apply for housing next year. Will testing be continued to be required for those who live on campus? And with the possible reopening, how does SJSU plan to help the community with housing?
So well, let me start and kind of walk through the questions. First of all, we will open the housing application on the 5th of April. So that's coming pretty quickly here. And we anticipate that we will be open, we will be at a capacity of anywhere from 60 to 70%. We really want our students to come back. And by doing that, that will still allow us to create appropriate physical distancing in the environment. We'll still have some of the controls that we have had in terms of having a no guest policy, closing off some of our common areas, and trying to limit students to having a single room, and limiting the number of students per bathroom, which has been very successful, and students have done a great job of really following those guidelines and being a part of the success. So we will have that housing available. That's going to happen very soon, and we're going to create those opportunities for new students as well as returning students. how we're going to help the community with housing. I mean, it's a broader question, and certainly we're going to look to house as many students on campus as we can. If there are issues beyond that, certainly we will work with students who may be housing insecure. We have our pilot program that is in place that secures a defined number of beds that remain for students. And we certainly will work with students who may be having difficulty, whether it's around housing or COVID. We're going to work with students as much as we can. And in the past, even in this past year through COVID, when we saw our friends at our sister institution, UC Santa Cruz, that had some difficulty, we worked with them when they had a fire and all the things that were happening there to try and house those students temporarily. So there's not one answer to the question, but we certainly will provide resources that we can that still allow our students to be prioritized and safe when we can do that for our community, whether that is students who aren't living on campus currently or other people when it is possible.
Great, thank you so much, Patrick. I'm going to welcome Charlie Foss, our Chief Financial Officer, to the forefront to answer a few questions. Charlie provides leadership and vision to a diverse set of business and finance units. He also provides financial oversight responsibilities for all auxiliaries on campus. So, Charlie, what food services and restaurants will be open for our campus in the fall?
So it's great to be here. Just about everything will be reopened in the fall with some enhancements. So Dining Commons, Village Market, things that are open today will continue to be open. Ginger Market will be open. The Student Union Food Services will be open. We're actually expanding our Panda Express offering. Our business, our busiest building food service item is doubling in capacity for the fall. So everything that everybody has enjoyed in the past is going to be open.
Great. Now, during the last town hall meeting, and not everyone may know this, but during the last town hall meeting, you talked about our budget deficit. Can you share an update on SJSU's financial situation?
Sure. We've been, as most people are aware, managing through a $92 million deficit this year. And to get through that deficit, we've judiciously used campus reserves, a slowdown on non-academic hiring and replacements. We've continued with our academic hiring. We're only rehiring into critical positions. We have many areas of spending reductions, and we've gotten some good money from the federal government, some various CARES monies packages that have come through. That said, we're starting our process for next year for the budget, and we still have some structural issues that we're working through. The good news is that the state has reinstated some of the cuts that they had from last year, so that's wonderful. We still have a ton of deferred maintenance issues that we have to work through. And today, we just got through Washington, the third round of federal CARES money was just approved. And now that's sitting on President Biden's desk for signature, and we anticipate that gets signed on Friday.
Great, thank you. And one last question. Do you foresee layoffs in 2021 or 2022?
So as of today, right now, we don't anticipate any campus-wide layoffs, for the balance of this year and for the next fiscal year.
Great. Thank you so much, Charlie. President Papazian, would you like to offer other comment on that and then wrap up our town hall for the day?
Sure, and thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all of you for your questions. Very, very important questions, and in those areas where we still don't have quite the information that you need for the planning that you need to do, please continue to monitor the Health Advisory's website and the messages that we'll be putting out as more of this comes into focus. We want to make sure that we give the community as much lead time as possible, because we know how many balls in the air you're juggling in your own personal situations. And so we're going to do everything we can to do that. As new questions come to you, or if we didn't address the questions as fully as you would like, or you have follow-up questions, please do send them into the Health Advisory's University's website, and we'll be monitoring that and providing as many responses as we're able to. And then just finally, just a reminder, the environment is constantly changing. And so we will continue to do what we can to adapt to it. Just as we've said, it's the ADAPT plan, and support the core mission of our institution, which is the teaching and learning, but do it in a way that addresses health and safety. So thank you to all of you again for your extraordinary resilience and work over this year. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It may be a distance, but it's there, and we'll continue to work with you and share what we can, and also learn from you what is on your mind, so we can find solutions that work for everyone. And with that, I'll thank you for being here, and we'll have another town hall next week for those who weren't able to join us today. So we look forward to continuing this conversation next week. Thank you very much.